All right, welcome everyone to our fortnightly group client meeting. And today we're going to continue with the review of the book, How to Be a Great Boss. A couple of weeks ago, we reviewed chapters 1 through to 4, and I'll do a quick recap of that. But mainly we're going to cover off chapters 5 to 7. And as per normal, what we'll do is we'll go through this training. I'll record this part of it, and then we'll have a discussion about the concepts covered in the book, and then just have a quick review of everyone's fortnight and projects, and in particular your plan. I know that it's the start of the quarter with COVID and lockdowns all happening. I must admit I've been thrown off as well, and like a lot of you have, and really need to get focused on the plan for the coming quarter. All right, so let's get into the book review. As I said, chapters 5 to 7. So firstly, just recap of chapters 1 to 4. Just very quickly, in those chapters, Gino Wickman, who wrote the book, covers off the concept of making sure that you've got a team that get it, that they understand what's required of them. They want the role, whether it's a normal team role or a manager role, and that they've got the capacity to fulfill that role as well. Secondly, you need to be excited about the challenges that leadership will bring. Leadership's not easy. There's always challenges when dealing with people. So you really need to be wanting to tackle those challenges as well. He went through a process to unlock or understand where you're spending your time and where you should be spending your time, and which items you should delegate to others. And then there's this very important concept of making sure that you understand the organizational structure and make sure you've got the right people in the right seat. And that's really the key to running a business that is easy and that performs well. It's making sure you've got the right people in the right seats. As part of that, understanding what your core values are, what behaviors you expect from your team, and then there's a tool called the People Analyzer that he uses to rate people across those values as well. All right, so that's a very quick recap of chapters 1 to 4. All right, so let me just cover off the key takeouts of each of these chapters 5 through to 7. So chapter 5 is all about leadership, management, and accountability. And he makes a point that leadership is working on the business. So it's setting the vision, the direction of the business, it's that big picture stuff. And we'll cover off the 5 principles that he talks about there. While management involves working in the business. So it's basically taking that plan and the vision and making sure it's implemented. And he obviously covers off 5 key management principles as well. And there's 4, what he calls the 4 truths of being a good leader and manager, or a great boss. And I think it's important to note, because a lot of people think that to be a great boss, I need to be charismatic, or there's certain people that are better leaders than others. But he dispels that, and he says, well, no, you can be, being a great boss is simple. You just need to follow those 5 leadership principles and 5 management principles, which I'll cover off in a minute. Secondly, your style doesn't have to change. You can be conservative. You don't have to be an outgoing, personality style. So just be yourself, because people can tell if you're not yourself, and if you try to fake it. Thirdly, you must genuinely care about your people. There was another great quote he said. He said, people don't care. I'll have to actually, I will bring it up, because you can probably see my notes here. Now, I'm happy to share these notes with you guys. This is a very detailed summary. But he says here, this is a quote here: people don't care what you know until they know that you care. Okay, so I thought that was definitely a good quote to take on board. And lastly, you must want to be great. It is hard work. It's working on yourself. It's developing your skills to become a better boss and a better leader and manager. Now we'll come back to these and discuss these principles in a minute. So chapter 6, he talks about the 5 leadership practices. And they give clear direction, make sure that you've communicated the vision of the business, the direction, the goals, the plan, and all of those things. Secondly, provide the necessary tools. And he covers off a few different things. He says definitely they need to have the right technology, they need to have the right resources and the right people if they need more people, but especially your time and attention. Okay, and he makes a very good point there, and he gives some examples of clients that he's worked with where the boss thought that the new team member had everything they needed, but then realized that he wasn't investing enough time in inducting that person, training them, and making sure they had enough knowledge and had enough of his time to really settle into the role and do well. Thirdly, learn to let go. You need to be able to give people the space to make decisions. Now, he premises this third one by saying, don't let go until you've gone through those previous steps of making sure you've got the right people in the right seats. If you don't have the right people in the right seats and you let go, then there will be issues. Okay, so that's the key. Number 4 is act with the greater good in mind. So he basically says, think long term, think in terms of the greater good of the business, not of yourself, and obviously encouraging others to think in the same way, to make the decisions that are the right decisions for the customer and for the business, not just looking after themselves. And this is an important one. Number 5 is all about taking what he calls clarity breaks away from the office. So this could be weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually. So taking time away from the day-to-day to just think, just to reflect, and just to think about things, without interruptions, and importantly, outside of the office. Okay, so they're the 5 leadership practices that he talks about. The 5 management practices he covers off in chapter 7. So the first is setting clear expectations. So making sure that each of your direct reports and team members know the role, know what's expected of the role, they understand the values, your core values in the business. And obviously chapters 1 to 4 cover that type of process. Sharing what your quarterly goals are, or what he calls the ROCs, and also KPIs, how performance is going to be measured, and how their performance, their role, but also their department and different parts of the business will be measured. Okay, so he says if you've done all that, then obviously it becomes a lot easier to manage someone. Secondly, communicate well. Don't assume that you know what they're thinking. Ask people what they're thinking. And he actually covers off 3. I'll flick back to my my notes here. He covers off in the management practices a few excellent communication techniques. So one he calls the 2 emotions. So he gives an example of someone in a meeting, and interestingly enough, this exact situation happened to another client of mine where he was sharing some information, and he noticed one of his team members sighed or rolled their eyes, and it's exactly the same example that Gino Wickman gives in his book. So instead of taking them to task there, speak to them afterwards and just ask them, how they're feeling about what was communicated, and in particular, share one positive thing that came to mind, but also one negative thing. And it's really looking at ways that you can open up conversations and understand what is happening in their mind. Don't assume, because you may make the wrong assumption. It's really having good ways to communicate and uncover what they're thinking and how they're feeling about things. Thirdly, having a weekly meeting pulse. Now, other authors such as Vern Harnish, who wrote the Rockefeller Habits, he calls that meeting rhythm. So every business needs to have a good rhythm of meetings. So whether it's daily huddles, weekly meetings, monthly meetings, and so on. So Gino Wickman talks about having a weekly meeting with your team or with your direct reports individually. Just it depends on your team dynamics, the people, yourself, what your preferences are, and whether it's weekly or fortnightly. It's all about having regular meetings with each person and with the team. and making sure they're on the same day and have the same format. The fourth thing in terms of these 5 management practices is having a quarterly, what he calls a quarterly conversation with each direct report. So this is taking them out of the office one-on-one and just having a catch up. It really just very informal. It's not a performance review. It's more about just reconnecting, reviewing how things are going. And he says because you get so busy during the quarter, it's good to just step back and reconnect and just talk about the big picture again with each person. And lastly, make sure you give regular feedback and recognition. So he talks about, I think we all know the principles there. It's all about giving feedback within 24 hours when they deserve some positive feedback. But also if there's something that they're doing wrong, then pull them up on it within 24 hours as well. If you leave it too late, then it loses its impact. And always only criticize in private and praise in public. Okay, so they're the key things that he went through in chapters 5 to 7. Actually, lastly, there was this other point that he mentions that if people still aren't performing and meeting those expectations, he uses this 3 strikes method, and that is meeting with them, talking about the issue, setting a time frame when you'll review that, and give them an opportunity to improve in that area. Have the second meeting, do the same, document it, and if by the 3rd meeting they haven't improved, then it's really time to terminate them. All right, so that's it from me. I'm going to unmute you or invite you to unmute yourselves, and let's have a discussion about what you got out of those chapters for those that have listened to it. So let's go back to chapter 5, or just in general. Who enjoyed reading or listening to that audio, and what did you get out of it, even if it's not by chapter, just in general?
Well, I struggle every time I try to listen to it, because I start to listen to it. I might have half an hour before my appointment, so I start to listen to it, and then some of the things he says, I then go off onto a tangent, thinking about what I should be doing, and then before I know it, he's in the background, and I'm off somewhere else with the fairies. So
that's exactly me too. You get one point, you start trying to think how you could do it, or you've missed the next 20 minutes he spoke about.
Yeah, I mean, when you said the first time I listened to the first 4 chapters, seriously, I listened to the first 4 chapters in those 2 weeks 4 or 5 times, and still couldn't tell you what those 4 or 5 chapters were about.
Well, that's why you're lucky that I've done this summary.
Yes, good guy.
Good it is.
That's why we have you, Anil.
I'm going to send this to you guys.
Okay. Oh, yeah, because I just struggled with it.
I know what you mean. I mean, I'm the same. If I'm not taking notes when I'm listening, and it can be hard, if you're in the car, if you're out gardening and listening to it on your AirPods or whatever it is hard to take notes. So what I generally do is I'll listen to it once and then I'll go back and listen to it again. But you've got to have the time then to write down notes.
Yeah, so you still have to sit down and do it, you see. So even driving, when you're driving, Lee's probably the same. We're out on the road. So I'll just throw that on and let's have a listen to that. And then same thing, you go off onto your tangent.
Yeah.
An ad man talks to you.
That's the downside of audios.
Yeah.
It's good because it's hard to just sit down and get to a book, but yeah, sometimes you need to be able to allocate that time to take notes. But apart from that, Michael and Lee, did you, and you may not have been able to get all of this down when you were listening to it and understanding it all, but just in principle, because I think the great thing about this book is it is so prescriptive. It says, just follow these 5 things for leadership, for management, just do these things regularly. Set it up first up, make sure that you've communicated the plan, the vision, the direction, the expectations, all of that. But then here, just do these things and everything will be fine. Okay, so it seems simple, but the tricky part is making sure you've set those expectations, you're clear yourself, and then you've set those expectations, and then you have a consistent way to implement those, the communication and the goals, the conversations, all of that.
Well, that's my biggest problem with these things. Like this, step one is the vision. Well, I don't have that noted down. I don't tell that to guys. So, you sort of think to yourself, well, should I just stop there and not go any further until I've got that bit sorted? Because, I've already failed step one. So do I need to get to step 20 where I've really, made it even wrong? So it's kind of knowing at what point you should stop and try and fix that up, or do you keep listening? Because as I say, it's a bit of a snowball effect that it continually goes back to, well, if you do this right, this will work, and you sort of keep going, well, I haven't done that right. So is that where the problem stems from? So it's trying to work out at what point you stop and do it. I'd also like to know in a real world sense, how many people listen to these and sort of go, I'm doing all these things right. I have everyone in the right, because I think to say that you've got everyone in the right seats, you've got this brilliant team. I'd like to know how many businesses out there can really say that, because it's not that easy. Like, you'd love to think you've got everyone, the perfect person, everyone in the right seat, but sadly, everyone's not perfect. Sadly, you have to, you've got what you've got. Sometimes you got to work with what you've got. Because as the likes of Nick and Noah is trying to find out, it's not that easy just to find other people to do as these people. So if they're not right, get rid of them, replace them. It's not that easy.
They make two really good points there, Lee, and definitely 2 points that are worth discussion. The first one about vision, you're right. Not everyone has that long-term vision, and I don't think you need that 5 to 10 year vision. I think you at least need to know what's important. What's the purpose? What are the what are you trying to achieve for your clients, for example?
The values one, I think, is, and again, that's something we haven't got, but that's something that I really took out of it. That's important to have them, whatever, 4 or 5 core values. And, because like they said, every decision should be based upon them values. And I 100% get that. And that's something I'd like to look at.
Yeah, good. And whether it's a longer term vision or whether it's just, goals for the next 12 months, it probably isn't critical. I think the values are more important, the expectations of the role, and that ties into values. But it could also tie into, if there are business goals that you have for the next 12 months, then aligned with that, there may be development goals for each person within the business. They may have their own goals. Now, I understand your team, Lee, and even Michael's team, and probably Nick's team as well. Most of them may not want to go further. They may not really have big goals. There may be 1 or 2 in the team that do want to develop themselves, learn things, maybe take a step up if possible, if there's opportunities. And so it's more a framework to think about. Ideally, if you could have some goals and others had goals, that's where we could move towards. And but not, that's the ideal situation. It's not going to be the case with every person. And the other point you made about ideally having the right people in the right seats, you're right. There is a shortage of skilled people, and sometimes you do need to decide how firm you need to be with the expectations and with the values. But I think the more that you let people get away with things and aren't performing, then the more it's going to rest on your shoulders. So
100%.
It's that's something which we probably just need to look at individually with each person. But I think the first step is knowing what you expect, knowing what the values are, what the behaviors you're expecting, getting clearer on ideally what each person should be doing in their role, whether or not they're meeting those. If we don't have those, that foundation first, or the list of what's expected, then there's little chance that you're going to get them to meet those expectations because they haven't been set. Whereas at least if you've written them down, you can identify where there are gaps, and then we can work out whether there are strategies to help people develop skills, or re-look at where they're best placed to match their attitude or skills, and whether or not others may that you hadn't thought about as stepping up could possibly step up instead. So, but yeah, it's hard to do that until you actually work out what you expect of each role in terms of functional responsibilities and values and behaviours. Yeah. Sorry, that was a long-winded response from me, but anyway, hopefully you guys, understand that it is. It's hard to achieve anything if we don't actually write them down and aren't clear about it ourselves first. Yeah. Especially with the values and roles and responsibilities. I understand that the long-term vision, not everyone has that, and it's not always necessary. Any other comments on the book, Michael? I think you were going to say something before.
No, like I said, I just struggle listening to it. Yep. So I have tried it several times, repeated it, go back, repeat, go back. So,
well, I'll send you the summary.
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, I'll read your summary, and I still will go into it because I'm up to chapter 7 or something.
Yeah.
On it. So I don't know how far it goes any further than that, but I'm up to chapter 7. So I have listened to it.
Yeah, good.
You know, the first 3 times, at least. So,
Nick, I know you've listened to it. Nick, you said you may not have listened to it recently, but you have in the past.
Yeah, look, I took a lot out of it, but I don't know. This week I'm on a downer. So I'm looking at that point 3 on your screen at the moment from chapter 5, going, you must genuinely care about your people, and I just don't at the moment. So yeah, that's a interesting one anyway.
But I think that may be because, you know, if we haven't set the expectations and all of those things in the past, then there's bound to be issues that come up. And even if you do set those things, it doesn't mean there's not going to be issues. Hopefully there's less issues. Yeah. So yeah, maybe, I mean, I know we're speaking later today, so we can discuss that in a bit more detail. Any other comments about any of these chapters that we've, like any of the steps here? Yeah, I really like this book because it's so, yeah, here are the steps, you know, it's all laid out. But I totally understand that a lot of this can seem theoretical, you know, how is it, yeah, it's a bit idealistic. But I do think, you know, it's something to work towards. Doesn't mean that you're going to be able to flick the switch and have all this in place, you know, in even 6 months. He says 6 months is the plan. But as long as you work towards these principles, things are bound to become better. It may not be ideal, but they'll be better than they are now. Bryony, were you going to say something?
I think the book is great. Obviously, it tells you a lot what you should do. But yeah, again, I just don't really see myself as a boss. Even though I'm in that role, but I find it really difficult to be the boss. I think I more see people as just a friend, another person. So I try to treat them as a friend, but then obviously it's like that line between, you know, wanting to correct them and pull them up for things that you're like, okay, no, you've done a great job, but now we need to do this. I find that really difficult because you don't want to make someone feel shit, but then you have to because you're the boss. But then, yeah, so I'm in a bit awkward. Don't really like being the boss.
I do genuinely think it's easier if you've set the expectations and you let them know up front that part of my role is, if I see something that needs to improve or the things need to be done a different way, my job's to let you know. And so if you tell them, like, if you have a way to induct people and communicate that up front, then normally you can just be relaxed, but then at least they know they're not going to be
The
surprised.
standard.
They're not gonna
Yeah.
be surprised when you bring it up.
Yeah. With these new people that have started in the last few weeks, I've kind of told myself to, be a friend, but then pull them up better on things, because usually I just let things slide. Like with our workers who have been with us for a while, I'll just be like, oh, okay, just let that one slide. But now with these new people, I think the more experience I've had, and understanding that I need to be more of a boss and not just let things slide, I'm definitely trying to do that. But it's awkward. I'm just naturally not a person that is, I'm more of a sheep than the leader. So yeah, but yeah, it was a good book.
Oh, but still, I think you obviously know how to train people, but yeah, that's something we can work on, Bryony. I think that's
Yeah.
and I do genuinely think if we can work out a way when people start, that this is the steps this is what you communicate to them, not
Yeah.
just about how to do the job, but also how you're going to give them feedback.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
then I think it becomes easier.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else before we move on?
I'd like to know how many out of this group are actually doing many of these things that we're supposed to be doing in this list. Who are doing
Good question. Let's go back to these practices.
like, am I the only one that's not doing 95% of it?
Quite bad, Nick.
I do some of it, Lee, but not brilliantly. Everything needs to be refined, but I do some of it at times.
Yeah. I think letting go is my biggest thing, because I've done it for so long. When someone else does it a little bit different, I'm like, oh, I don't like that. So yeah, letting go is difficult.
Yeah.
And that come back to having the right people in the right seat, and I feel like I might not have that kind of people yet, so letting go is not possible.
Yeah.
So that's
True.
All right. So in terms of direction, it is, I think, Nick, you've shared, where you want to take things, especially the two guys that are the site leaders. Necessary tools. I think you all do that, in terms of, making sure they've got, the technology, the training, your time. I think all of you are probably pretty good on that. Letting go, as you said, it's easier to do that when you've got the right people. I think all of you probably do number 4. You do have the customers and the business in mind rather than yourselves, and this is as a boss, that's probably, as the owner, I should say, that's easier. In a larger business, this book's also designed for people in bigger businesses where you're a manager of a department, you're not the owner of the business. And in those situations, you can understand that some people may make decisions for their own role rather than the company. But you and the company are basically, or the business are basically the same. So number 4 is a bit easier. Number 5 is something which, I think you all probably do take time away, whether it's probably more just for your personal leisure rather than intentionally taking time away to think about the business. So that's probably not critical, but it would help. And then these ones here, I think this is an area which most of you need to work on. You may already do it, but it's working out, how can we improve that? There's obviously a gap there between what you're expecting and what you're getting. So probably need to start with, well, are we setting the right expectations in the first place? And this one here, I know that can be tricky to use some of the techniques that he's shared. Yeah, and that's probably something we probably need to work on a way with each of your team. If you're not sure how they're feeling about things, set them aside and actually just have a way to ask them and work out, what's working well, what they feel needs to improve, or what they're not happy about. Weekly meetings, I think you all do that pretty well. Bryony, I know you've got a very, very structured week. You're having your Monday meetings. Michael, I don't think you're having regular weekly meetings, but hopefully you're still having your toolbox meetings. And Lee, I know you are having regular, was it fortnightly meetings?
Fortnightly, every second Monday, yeah.
And this is the one which all of you could probably do. None of you are probably doing this one, having one-on-one, just quarterly catch-ups out of the office, just a coffee catch-up, for example, with each person, okay? With each direct report. Now, most of you have got a very flat structure, but it's just having that time out and just to have a chat and catch up and have that, build that personal rapport. And also this one here, just regularly, focusing on that. So, I think most of you are doing most of those things. It's just, there's a few things that we probably need to work on. So we'll do that over, let's see if we can focus on that between now and the end of the year. All right, anything else before we move on? All right, so I'm going to just stop that recording.